March 3rd, 1943, 7:46 in the morning, Bismarck Sea 70 miles northwest of Lae, New Guinea. Captain Robert Mitchell crouched behind the controls of his modified B-25 bomber, approaching Japanese convoy at wavetop height, 50 feet above the Pacific, salt spray misting his windscreen. Airspeed 240 knots, range to target 2 miles. 1450 caliber machine guns mounted in his aircraft's nose. Every gun loaded, every safety off. Every trigger connected to firing buttons beneath his thumbs. Behind him, 11 more modified bombers flew line abreast. A wall of firepower 300 yards wide bearing down on 8 Japanese transport ships. 7,000 enemy troops bound for New Guinea. 8 destroyer escorts protecting them. Every deck gun tracking the approaching Americans. His co-pilot spoke quietly. "Sir, they're locked on to us." Mitchell kept the throttle forward. The twin Allison engines roared at full power. 14 guns, 2,150 pounds of lead per second, if his calculations were right. 3 weeks ago, engineers at Wright Field, Ohio, had declared his modifications impossible. The aircraft was too heavy, they said. The balance was wrong. It would never fly properly. They recommended grounding every modified bomber immediately. Mitchell's hand moved to the firing triggers. Those engineers had never lost their family to a Japanese prison camp. They had never watched their bomber force destroyed trying to stop convoys like this one. They had calculations and theories and wind tunnel data. Mitchell had desperation and a welding torch. Range 800 yards. Japanese gunners opening fire. Tracers walking toward his nose like streams of burning rain. Mitchell pressed all firing buttons simultaneously. Freeze frame, the moment before everything changes. Let's go back to where this impossible machine was born. December 6, 1941, Manila, Philippines. 14 months before that frozen moment over the Bismarck Sea. Robert Mitchell, 43 years old, stood in the hangar of Mitchell Air Services, watching mechanics service his fleet. 5 Beechcraft Model 18 aircraft gleaming in afternoon sunlight. The company he'd built from nothing over 12 years. Each plane a testament to hard work, mechanical knowledge, and calculated risk. The hangar smelled like aviation fuel and hot metal and engine grease. Good smells, honest smells. The smell of things that worked because someone made them work. Mitchell Air Services operated passenger and cargo routes across the Philippine archipelago. Manila to Cebu, Cebu to Davao, Davao to Zamboanga. Island hopping. The business was thriving. American presence in the Philippines was strong. The future looked secure. Mitchell had 21 years naval aviation experience before starting the airline. He understood engines the way some men understood scripture. Could hear problems in the rhythm of a cylinder firing. Could feel imbalances in propeller rotation through his fingertips on a cowling. That mechanical knowledge, combined with business instinct and respect for Filipino work ethic, had created something rare in the Pacific. A successful commercial aviation company employing local talent who knew the islands better than any American ever could. His wife Maggie managed the company's administrative operations, sharp with numbers, better with people. Their 4 children attended American school in Manila. Sarah at 15 was learning navigation plotting courses on charts with the precision of someone who actually cared about accuracy. Michael at 12 wanted to be a pilot, spent every spare hour in the hangar asking questions that showed he was thinking 3 steps ahead. Catherine and James were still young enough to think airplanes were magic, but the Philippines felt like home to all of them. Evening of December 6th, Mitchell family dinner at their home near Malate District. Maggie served chicken adobo prepared by their housekeeper. The smell of vinegar and soy sauce and garlic filled the dining room. Steam rose from the serving bowl. The children talked about school, their voices overlapping in the comfortable chaos that meant everyone felt safe. Sarah mentioned a boy interested in her. Michael described an airplane he'd sketched something with retractable landing gear that probably violated 3 laws of physics, but showed creativity. Catherine and James argued about whose turn it was to help clear dishes. Normal, domestic, safe. Mitchell sat at the head of the table thinking about the business and trying not to think about the intelligence he'd received that week from Navy contacts. Japanese forces moving south through Indochina. War was coming, not maybe anymore. The question wasn't if, the question was when. He'd mentioned to Maggie that morning that they should consider evacuating the family to Australia. just temporarily, until tensions resolved. Maggie had refused with the quiet certainty of someone who'd made up her mind and wouldn't be moved. The Philippines were her home now. The children's school year was just starting. The business needed both of them. War might not come at all. Americans had been worried about Japan for years. Nothing had happened yet. Why panic? Mitchell didn't push. He'd been wrong before about military predictions. Maybe he was being paranoid. Maybe the intelligence was overblown. Maybe everything would be fine. He went to bed that night, December 6th, thinking about aircraft maintenance schedules and cargo manifests for next week's flights, planning routes, calculating fuel loads, normal concerns of a man running a small airline. He woke up December 7th to news that Pearl Harbor was burning. December 8th, 10 hours after Pearl Harbor. Japanese bombers attacked Clark Field and Nichols Field outside Manila. Most American aircraft destroyed on the ground within 2 hours. Rows of fighters and bombers burning on runways. Pilots scrambling, but too late. Years of preparation and positioning erased before anyone could react. The Philippine air defense was crippled in one morning. Mitchell tried to evacuate his family. Booked them on a ship to Australia. Packed bags in a rush. Got the children ready amid confusion and fear. But Japanese landings came faster than anyone expected. Faster than intelligence had predicted. December 22nd, Japanese forces entered Manila. The world moved too quickly for civilians to keep pace. The evacuation ship never sailed. Mitchell got his family to Santo Tomas University campus, where Americans and Allied nationals were gathering under orders from occupying forces. The Japanese were herding all foreigners into internment camps. Santo Tomas would become the primary civilian internment facility in Manila. 3,700 civilians inside when the gates closed. Mitchell's family among them. January 4th, 1942. The gates closed with the sound of metal on metal. Final, absolute. Mitchell himself was at the docks trying to secure transport when the camp sealed. He missed getting trapped by 30 minutes. 30 minutes that felt like a gift from God and a curse from hell at the same time. His naval aviation background and active reserve status meant he was ordered to evacuate immediately with military personnel. No choice. Orders: leave or face court-martial. Mitchell's last communication with Maggie came through a Filipino contact who could still move between the camp and the city. Dangerous work that would get the contact killed if the Japanese discovered it. The man took the risk anyway because some things mattered more than safety. Maggie's note dated January 6, 1942. Written on paper torn from a school notebook. Her handwriting neat despite the circumstances. Controlled. Trying not to scare him. Bob, the children are scared but safe. Food is adequate for now. Don't worry about us. Do what you need to do. Come back when you can. We'll be here waiting. I love you. M. That note stayed in Mitchell's jacket pocket for the next 3 years. He read it every day, memorized every word, every loop of her handwriting, every slight variation in ink pressure where she'd pause to think. The paper became soft from handling, creased, almost translucent at the folds. Sometimes he held it just to remember what her handwriting looked like, what her voice sounded like when she called Ian Bun instead of Robert. The separation was supposed to be temporary. Everyone expected MacArthur's forces to retake Manila within months, 6 months maximum. The Japanese advance would stall, American reinforcements would arrive. The Philippines would be liberated by summer. Everyone believed this because the alternative was unbearable. But months became a year became 2 years, and the intelligence reports from Santo Tomas grew darker with each passing season, like storm clouds building on a horizon you couldn't escape. Food rations decreasing, 1 meal per day, then 1 meal every other day, medicine running out, disease spreading through cramped barracks where sanitation was primitive and healthcare was non-existent, prisoners dying from malnutrition, dysentery, malaria, typhoid, beriberi, children especially vulnerable to diseases that should have been easily treatable with proper nutrition and medicine. And then came the report that made Mitchell's blood cold, that woke him up at night in sweat-soaked sheets. Japanese camp commander had informed the International Red Cross that all prisoners would be executed if Allied forces approached Manila. Not a threat, a promise. Documented, official. His family's survival depended on keeping them away from combat zones. But liberating them required bringing combat directly to Manila, an impossible equation with no good solution. Mitchell lay awake nights trying to solve problems that had no answers, staring at tent ceilings in Australia, while his family starved 2,000 miles north. Mitchell joined Army Air Force in February 1942, not for patriotism, not for glory, not because of ideology or politics or any abstract principle about democracy or freedom. For one reason: get close enough to the Philippines to bring his family home. Every mission, every innovation, every risk he would take over the next 3 years had a single purpose: save Maggie, save Sarah Michael Catherine James. Everything else was secondary. July 1942, Eagle Farm Airfield, Brisbane, Australia. 5 months since Mitchell's family was imprisoned. 5 months that felt like 5 years. 5th Air Force was dying by attrition. Not from Japanese fighters, not from anti-aircraft fire, from their own tactical failures, from doctrine that didn't match reality on the ground or in the air, from flying the wrong missions in the wrong ways for the wrong reasons, because that's what the manual said to do. Captain Mitchell, now assigned to 5th Air Force Headquarters as aviation engineering consultant, reviewed the casualty reports from July operations. 3rd Attack Group had lost 11 A-20 Havoc light bombers in 1 month. 55 aircrew killed or missing. 55 families receiving telegrams. 55 holes in the squadron roster that couldn't be filled fast enough because trained bomber crews didn't grow on trees. All trying to hit Japanese convoys from high altitude, following doctrine written by people who'd never faced concentrated ship anti-aircraft fire, who'd never seen what 25mm cannon did to aluminum skin and human bodies. The bombardiers couldn't hit moving ships. The mathematics made it impossible. From 10,000 feet, the bomb took 18 seconds to fall. In 18 seconds, a ship moving at 15 knots traveled 450 feet, half the length of a football field. Bombardiers calculated lead angles, wind drift, target speed, relative motion. They did the mathematics perfectly. They dropped their bombs exactly where the equations said to drop them. The bombs hit water 200 feet from the ship, close enough to scare fish, not close enough to damage steel. When bombers dropped lower to improve accuracy, Japanese deck guns shredded them. The 25mm anti-aircraft cannons on Japanese destroyers could track and hit aircraft at 3,000 feet. The heavy machine guns reached 2,000 feet effectively. Bombers at those altitudes were defenseless, slow, straight flight paths, perfect targets for gunners who'd trained for years to do exactly this. Captain William Henderson commanded a squadron in 3rd Attack Group. Mitchell watched Henderson brief crews before a mission to intercept Japanese convoy in Coral Sea. Standard briefing, standard mission, standard doctrine that was killing them. 12 A-20 bombers, 72 men, young faces, some barely old enough to shave properly. They flew out at dawn wearing their lucky charms and carrying photographs of sweethearts and families. 6 aircraft returned at dusk, 36 men gone. Half the force erased in one mission that accomplished nothing. Henderson debriefed in Mitchell's presence that night, voice flat, emotionless from shock. The kind of voice that comes when emotion would break you completely and you still had responsibilities to the men who survived. We dropped from 8,000 feet. Thought lower altitude would help accuracy. The deck guns were ready. They tracked us from 2 miles out. Tracer fire everywhere like someone turned on 1,000 searchlights. Williams took hits and the engine went straight down. No bailout. Martinez's bomber caught fire. Crew bailed at 500 feet, too low for chutes to open properly. Thompson's aircraft broke apart in midair. Just came apart like someone tore paper. Wings folded back and the whole thing disintegrated. Henderson paused, hands shaking as he lit a cigarette with a match that took 3 tries to strike. His fingers wouldn't stay steady. We didn't hit a single ship, not one. 36 men dead for nothing. Mitchell had been thinking about the problem for weeks, lying awake at night, drawing diagrams, running calculations. High altitude didn't work. The mathematics said so clearly. The casualty reports proved it bloodily. Low altitude got you killed. The deck guns guaranteed it with mechanical certainty. But what if low altitude could be made survivable? The concept was called skip bombing, pioneered by British pilots attacking German ships in the North Sea. Proven effective but dangerous. Fly at wave top height, 50 feet above water. drop bombs with delayed fuses. The bombs skip across waters like stones skipping on a pond. They hit the ship's hull at or below the waterline where armor was thinnest. Even if they don't explode immediately, they hold the ship. Flooding, loss of power, mission kill, point-blank range, impossible to miss, like shooting a barn from inside the barn. But surviving the approach was the problem Henderson's dead crews had just demonstrated. From 50 feet altitude, every deck gun on every ship could fire directly at you. Machine guns, cannon, even rifles. Japanese crews were trained, disciplined, experienced. Veterans of China campaigns. They wouldn't miss targets that close, that slow, that vulnerable. You had to suppress those guns before they could fire. You needed overwhelming forward firepower. You needed to turn your bomber into a strafer. Mitchell approached General Thomas Carson, new 5th Air Force commander, with the concept. Carson was unconventional, willing to try radical ideas. He'd just arrived from the States with orders to stop the Japanese advance in New Guinea. Traditional methods weren't working. Carson wanted new approaches. He said so in his first briefing. Mitchell's pitch was direct. Give me 1 week. Let me modify an A-20. Mount 450 caliber machine guns in the nose where the bombardier sits. Forward firing, pilot controlled. I'll prove the concept works, or I'll admit it doesn't. Carson studied Mitchell across his desk. Afternoon light coming through the tent made shadows on maps of New Guinea spread across rough wood. You know aircraft, you know engineering, but do you know combat? Mitchell answered honestly, no sir. But I know losing. I've watched it for 5 months. What we're doing now doesn't work. This might, I can't promise it will. But I can promise it's different from what's killing us now. Carson approved. 1 week, 1 aircraft. Prove it or abandon the idea. Mitchell began work August 17, 1942. The A-20 Havoc was a good platform. Twin-engine, sturdy airframe, decent speed for a light bomber. But it was designed as a level bomber. The nose was a bombardier station with a greenhouse window and a single .30 caliber machine gun for defense against frontal attacks. Mitchell needed to strip all that out and install 450 caliber M2 Browning machine guns. Each gun weighed 64 pounds. 64 pounds of steel and springs and firing mechanisms and recoil systems. 4 guns plus ammunition meant 256 pounds concentrated in the nose. The aircraft's center of gravity would shift forward dramatically. The plane would be nose-heavy. Want to pitch down? Probably unflyable according to every aeronautical engineering textbook ever written. But where to get the guns, 5th Air Force was desperately short of everything. No spare parts arriving from the States. No extra weapons sitting in warehouses. Supply lines stretched thin across half the Pacific and breaking under the strain. Mitchell walked the aircraft graveyards at Eagle Farm. Wrecked P-39 Airacobras and P-40 Warhawks that would never fly again. Twisted metal and burned paint and shattered canopies. Impact damage. Fire damage. Combat damage that was too extensive to repair with available resources. The pilots were dead, bodies recovered or still in wreckage or never found. But the guns weren't dead. Steel didn't die. Steel just waited. He salvaged 450 caliber guns from 3 wrecked fighters. Cleaned them, tested them, confirmed they functioned. Then he designed a steel mounting frame to fit inside the A-20's nose compartment, hand-drawn blueprints, measurements in pencil on graph paper. No computer calculations, no stress analysis software, no wind tunnel testing, just mechanical knowledge and educated guesses based on 21 years of working with aircraft. The ground crew thought he was insane. Mounting 4 heavy machine guns in a space designed for 1 man and a Norden bomb site, it would throw the aircraft's balance off completely. It would be nose-heavy, drop out of the sky on takeoff, kill whoever flew it before they could even report what went wrong. Mitchell spent 16 hours a day under the wing with a welding torch, the blue flame bright in the dimness of the hangar, the smell of hot metal and welding flux. The mechanics helped because they respected him, not because they believed it would work. Some had flown with him on test flights. Others had drunk with him in the officers' club and heard his stories. They helped because that's what you did for someone you respected, even when you thought they were wrong. They called him Pappy because at 43 he was older than most pilots by a decade or more, old enough to be their father. Some called the project Pappy's Folly. The name stuck, better than other names they could have chosen. September 2nd, 1942. First test flight, volunteer test pilot, Lieutenant James Porter, experienced with A-20s. Young, capable, brave. Exactly the kind of pilot who dies testing experimental modifications that violate basic principles of aircraft design. Porter taxied to the runway, ran up engines, listened to them, everything sounding normal, released brakes, aircraft accelerated. At rotation speed, Porter pulled back on the yoke. The nose barely came up. The A-20 lifted off, but immediately wanted to pitch forward, wanted to dive back into the ground. Porter fought the controls using full back pressure on the yoke just to maintain level flight. The stick pressed hard against his chest, arms straining, muscles burning. From the tower, Mitchell heard Porter on the radio, voice tight with strain and controlled fear. "She's nose heavy, really nose heavy. I can barely hold her level." "Recommending we scrub this test," Mitchell replied. "Can you maintain controlled flight?" "Barely. This is dangerous. Circle the field once, then land." Porter completed one circuit, fighting the aircraft every second. Landed hard but safely, tires squealing, brakes smoking, climbed out shaking, face pale. Sweat soaked through his flight suit despite the cool morning air. "Captain Mitchell, that aircraft is a death trap. The center of gravity is all wrong. You can't put that much weight in the nose without rebalancing the entire aircraft. Basic aeronautical engineering. First principles. This won't work." Mitchell had known this would be the problem. Now he had to solve it. 2 days. That's all he gave himself. 2 days to fix what took aircraft companies months to calculate or admit the whole project was a failure. Mitchell spent 2 days rebalancing the A-20, moved radio equipment from nose compartment to tail section, adjusted tail trim tabs to provide constant up pressure, relocated battery aft, redistributed ammunition storage, every change calculated to shift weight backward, to compensate for the nose-heavy guns, to make mathematics work in his favor instead of against him. The second test pilot reported the aircraft flew like it was angry, like it resented being in the air, but it flew. Good enough for combat, good enough to kill. September 12, 1942. Combat test at Buna. 16 modified A-20s hit Japanese airfield at Buna, New Guinea. First combat test of the strafer concept. Everything riding on this mission. If it failed, men died and the project ended, and Mitchell went back to watching bomber crews get slaughtered by deck guns. If it worked, everything changed. The strafers came in at treetop level, 50 feet above jungle canopy, navigation lights off, radio silence. Japanese radar didn't see them until too late. Surprise complete. Pilots opened fire at 800 yards. 50 caliber rounds walked across the airfield like invisible chainsaws cutting through everything. Japanese aircraft parked in revetments exploded. Fuel dumps ignited in orange fireballs. Ammunition stores cooked off in secondary explosions that sent shrapnel across the entire airfield. Anti-aircraft positions were destroyed before gunners could traverse their weapons toward the attacking aircraft. Results: 14 Japanese aircraft destroyed on the ground. Every anti-aircraft position suppressed or destroyed. 0 A-20s lost. 0 casualties. Complete success. General Carson wanted more. Wanted it immediately. But the A-20 had problems that success couldn't fix. Range too short to reach Japanese bases across Owen Stanley Mountains. Bomb load too light for major targets. Mitchell needed a bigger platform, longer range, heavier payload, more space for guns and ammunition. The B-25 Mitchell bomber, medium bomber, twin engine, longer range, greater payload, and coincidentally named after his own family. Mitchell. Some might call it fate. Mitchell called it coincidence, but found it satisfying anyway. December 1942. B-25 modification begins. Mitchell pulled the bombardier station and nose guns from a B-25C, installed 450 caliber guns in solid nose. No bombardier needed. Pilot aimed and fired. Added 4 more guns in external cheek packs on the fuselage sides. Rotated the top turret forward so it could fire ahead instead of just up and back. 10 forward firing guns. Then he looked at the design and thought not enough. Added 2 more guns on each side. 14 guns total. 2,150 pounds of lead per second. More firepower than any bomber in history. More firepower than most destroyers carried. The ground crew stopped calling it Pappy's Folly. They started calling it the Flying Destroyer. Mitchell test flew the prototype B-25 himself. At 43 years old, technically too old for combat flying by regulation. But this was engineering test work. Loopholes existed. Nobody stopped him. Nobody wanted to. The aircraft was nose-heavy again, worse than the A-20 had been. During takeoff, Mitchell needed full back pressure on the control yoke just to keep the nose from dropping into the runway. The B-25 wanted to fall out of the scape, wanted to auger in. Everything in the aircraft's design and aerodynamic principles said this shouldn't work. But once airborne and at speed, the bomber flew. Not gracefully, not smoothly. It handled like a truck with a broken suspension on a dirt road. But it flew and it had firepower that could destroy anything it pointed at. That was enough. General Carson ordered 12 more conversions immediately. The 81st Air Depot Group at Townsville worked 18-hour shifts, modifying every available B-25. Mechanics welding, engineers calculating, supply officers scrounging guns from wrecks. Everyone believing now because the prototype worked when theory said it couldn't. By February 1943, they had 30 strafers ready for combat, 30 flying destroyers, 30 impossible aircraft that engineers said couldn't fly but flew anyway. Then someone decided to send the blueprints to Wright Field for official approval. General Carson sent the modification blueprints to Wright Field, Ohio, Army Air Force Engineering Headquarters, where PhD engineers with wind tunnel facilities and stress calculation laboratories designed aircraft according to established principles and proven science. The Wright Field engineers studied Mitchell's hand-drawn plans for 3 days, analyzed the modifications with computers and slide rules and mathematical models, calculated stresses, modeled aerodynamics, did everything by the book, by established procedures, by accepted methodology. Then they sent a message back to Australia. The message arrived at 5th Air Force Headquarters marked urgent, modifications impractical, center of gravity too far forward, aircraft overweight by 380 pounds, structural stress exceeds safe limits, nose gun muzzle blast will buckle fuselage skin around cheek mounts, recommend grounding all modified B-25s immediately pending proper engineering analysis. General Carson was in Washington, D.C. when the message arrived. He walked into General Harold Anderson's office, where Wright Field engineers were waiting to explain in person why Pappy Mitchell's gunship was aerodynamically impossible, why it violated fundamental principles, why it would kill pilots who flew it. They had charts, they had calculations, they had proof. Carson let them present their analysis. 20 minutes of technical explanation, stress calculations showing where the airframe would fail, center of gravity charts proving the aircraft couldn't maintain stable flight, wind loading diagrams demonstrating how gun blasts would damage the fuselage, mathematical proofs that concluded this aircraft cannot work. The engineers finished their presentation, confident they'd made their case, confident that science would prevail over field-expedient modifications, confident that proper engineering would stop this dangerous experiment before more pilots died. Then Carson spoke, his voice quiet, controlled. 12 of those impossible airplanes just destroyed an entire Japanese convoy in the Bismarck Sea. 8 transports sunk, 4 destroyers sunk, nearly 7,000 enemy troops killed. I have 60 more strafers being modified in Australia right now. The room went silent. General Anderson looked at the Wright Field engineers, then at Carson, then at the calculations spread across his desk, then back at the engineers. Get out. The engineers left. Carson stayed. And Pappy Mitchell's impossible gunship became the most effective anti-shipping weapon in the Pacific theater. But Carson's message to Wright Field left out one critical detail. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea hadn't happened yet. When he sent that message, the strafers were still being modified. The convoy was still at sea. The impossible aircraft hadn't proven anything except that they could fly without falling apart. Everything depended on what happened next. February 28, 1943, Melbourne, Australia. Allied intelligence headquarters in a converted bank building. Codebreakers intercepted and decrypted Japanese naval messages. Standard procedure, routine work. Then someone noticed the convoy size and destination. The routine became urgent. A major force was departing Rabaul, heading south through Bismarck Sea toward New Guinea. 8 transport ships, 8 destroyer escorts, nearly 7,000 Japanese troops, enough to turn the war in New Guinea in Japan's favor, enough to push Allied forces back to the sea. enough to make everything the 5th Air Force had accomplished in the past year meaningless. General Carson had 72 hours to stop them. The convoy would cross 400 miles of open water between New Britain and New Guinea. Japanese commanders believed March monsoon weather would protect them. Low clouds, heavy rain, poor visibility. Allied bombers couldn't hit what they couldn't see. History supported this belief. Monsoon season had always favored the side that didn't need clear skies. They were right about the weather. Wrong about the bombers. March 2nd, reconnaissance aircraft spotted the convoy steaming south through Vitiaz Strait. B-17 flying fortresses attacked from 15,000 feet through cloud breaks. Heavy bombers doing what heavy bombers did. Dropping ordnance from altitude where fighters couldn't reach them. They dropped 137 bombs, claimed multiple hits. Crews certain they'd damaged several ships. Some bombardiers swore they saw direct hits on transports. Explosions, smoke, success. Post-battle analysis showed they sank nothing. 0 ships hit. 137 bombs dropped. 137 bombs that hit water and did nothing except kill fish and waste explosives. High-altitude bombing against moving targets didn't work. Everyone knew this. The mission was flown anyway because it was doctrine, because the manual said so, because admitting it didn't work meant admitting years of training and tactics were wrong. The Japanese convoy kept coming. By nightfall, March 2nd, the transports were within 1 day of landing at Lai, within striking distance, within winning distance. Captain William Henderson briefed 90th Bomb Squadron evening of March 2nd at Port Moresby. The operations tent was crowded, hot, smelling of men and aviation fuel and tropical humidity. Maps spread across tables showed the convoy's position and projected course. 12 B-25 strafers, 30 AP Havocs modified with forward guns, Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighters for top cover, P-38 Lightning fighters to handle Japanese Zeros. The largest strike force 5th Air Force had ever assembled for a single mission. The plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. Attack at masthead height, 50 feet above water, gun range point blank. Overwhelm deck guns with concentrated forward firepower. Skip bomb the ships while they're stunned. Exit before Zeros arrive from Leh. Henderson had flown 1 practice mission using this tactic. 1. The crews had trained for 2 weeks. Not enough time to master something this dangerous. Not nearly enough. His navigator, Lieutenant Robert Chen, asked the question everyone was thinking. Captain, what happens if a strafer takes fire during the approach? Henderson answered honestly. We'll find out tomorrow. The briefing ended at 2200 hours. Nobody slept. Men wrote letters home, checked equipment, smoked cigarettes, played cards without paying attention to the game, thought about the morning and tried not to think about the morning. Mitchell was not flying the mission. He was Headquarters Staff Special Projects Officer. His job was designing modifications, not combat. But that night, March 2nd, he couldn't sleep either. He walked the flight line at Port Moresby, checking each modified B-25, touching the gun mounts, verifying the ammunition feeds, making sure his engineering work wouldn't fail the crews who trusted it. Each aircraft represented lives. His modifications were supposed to keep these men safer, give them a fighting chance against deck guns that had killed so many already. But if something failed, if a gun jammed or a mount broke under recoil, stressed men would die because of his work, because of calculations he'd made, because of welds he'd supervised. Mitchell sat in the operations tent at 0200 hours, pulled out paper, wrote a letter to Maggie that he never sent, never intended to send, just needed to write it. Maggie, tomorrow we test everything I've built, 12 strafers against an entire Japanese convoy. If it works, we change how this war is fought. If it fails, good men die and we're back to losing. I think about you and the children every day, every hour. Intelligence says conditions at Santo Tomas are worsening. Food rations cut again, medicine scarce. Children dying from diseases that shouldn't kill anyone. I'm trying to get there, Maggie. Every innovation, every mission gets us closer to the Philippines, closer to bringing you home. I should have evacuated you when I had the chance. That failure haunts me, wakes me up at night. I'm trying to make up for it. I'm trying to build weapons that will win this war fast enough to save you. Please survive. Please keep the children alive. Tell them their father is coming. Tell them I haven't forgotten. Tell them everything I do is for them. I love you, Bob. He folded the letter, put it in his jacket pocket with the note from January 1942. 2 letters, one from her, one to her, both undeliverable across 2,000 miles in Japanese-occupied territory in a war that showed no signs of ending. Cut to Santo Tomas Internment Camp, Manila. Same night, 2,000 miles north. Maggie Mitchell lay awake on her bunk in the cramped barrack. Sarah beside her, Catherine and James sharing a bunk nearby. Michael on the men's side of the divided building. Families separated by gender after the first year. Japanese orders, no exceptions. Food rations had been cut twice in the past month. 1 bowl of rice, thin vegetable soup with almost no vegetables. Once per day, if you were lucky. Twice per day if you were a child and the adults gave up their portions. The children were always hungry, always asking when the next meal would come, always disappointed by how little there was. Sarah, at 15 years old, had stopped menstruating from malnutrition. Her body couldn't spare the resources. Catherine, at 8, had developed dysentery that wouldn't go away. The camp hospital had no medicine for it. Just keep her hydrated, they said, as if water alone could fix intestines damaged by disease and starvation. James, at 5, cried at night from hunger pains that twisted his stomach into knots. Maggie held Sarah's hand in the darkness, whispered the same thing she'd whispered for 14 months. Your father's coming. He'll find a way. He always finds a way. Sarah's voice came back weak, tired. Mom, how do you know he's even alive? Maggie didn't have an answer based on evidence or facts. She hadn't heard from Bob in 14 months. He could be dead. The entire American military presence in the Philippines could be dead. Everyone they'd known before the war could be dead. The camp was an information vacuum. Rumors circulated, but truth was scarce. But she chose to believe, had to believe, because the alternative was lying down and dying and taking her children with her. So she believed, made herself believe, forced belief into existence through pure will. He's alive, and he's coming. Hold on, Sarah. Just hold on. In the darkness, Sarah squeezed her mother's hand, but didn't answer, didn't argue, didn't agree. Just held on because holding on was all she could do. March 3rd, 1943, 0630 hours, Cape Ward Hunt, New Guinea. 137 Allied aircraft assembled in the dawn light. B-17 flying fortresses in high formation at 20,000 feet. B-25 strafers and A-20 Havocs at low-altitude engines idling pilots checking instruments. P-38 Lightning fighters flying escort their twin booms distinctive against the pink morning sky. Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighters for additional firepower and target marking. The largest strike force 5th Air Force had ever assembled. Everything available that could fly and fight, everything Carson could put in the air. Target Japanese convoy 70 miles northwest of Lae. 8 transports, 8 destroyer escorts, 7,000 troops. The weather was exactly as bad as predicted. Low clouds, rain squalls, visibility dropping to near zero in places. Perfect for the Japanese. Terrible for conventional bombing. Perfect for what the strafers were about to do. The B-17s attacked first. High altitude, through cloud breaks. Their purpose wasn't hitting ships. Everyone knew they wouldn't hit ships. Their purpose was drawing defensive fire upward, making Japanese gunners look at the sky, creating the distraction. Every Japanese deck gun on every ship traversed skyward. Gunners tracked the high bombers. Black puffs of anti-aircraft fire filled the sky above the convoy like angry punctuation marks. Explosions, shrapnel, the visual language of air defense. The Japanese crews were looking up when the strafers arrived low. Captain Henderson led 12 B-25s in from the southeast at wave-top height, 50 feet above water. The ocean's surface blurred beneath them. Salt spray kicked up by prop wash. Line abreast formation. 300-yard wall of approaching death. Inside Henderson's cockpit, everything was steady hands and controlled breathing and the knowledge that this would work or they would die. No middle ground. No partial success. Either the modifications saved them or the deck guns killed them. The transport Kyokusei Maru's lookout saw them at 2 miles. Distant specks against the gray ocean. Growing larger. Coming fast. The ship's captain ordered hard to starboard. The 6,000-ton cargo ship began turning. Rudder over, wake curving, too slow. Ships don't turn like cars. Physics and momentum and water resistance meant the Kyokusei Maru was still presenting her broadside when the strafers reached gun range. Henderson's strafer carried 14 forward-firing 50 caliber machine guns. 12 strafers meant 168 guns total, 168 streams of destruction about to converge on ships that expected high-altitude bombing, not low-level strafing. Range 800 yards. Henderson gave the order over radio. All aircraft guns free. 168 machine guns opened fire simultaneously. The sound was like continuous thunder rolling across the water. 50 caliber rounds walked across the ocean surface in visible streams. Where tracers hit, water spray erupted 30 feet high. The rounds reached Kyokusei Maru's superstructure at 300 yards per second. Beat of sound, faster than human reaction time. Metal sparked, wood splintered, glass shattered. The bridge windows disintegrated into flying shards. The ship's captain took 3 rounds through the chest, through the uniform jacket his wife had mended, before he left port through skin and ribs and lungs. He was dead before his body hit the deck. The helmsman's head exploded in red mist. Gone. Just gone. Anti-aircraft gun crews on the forward deck died at their weapons. They never got a single shot off. The 50 caliber stream cut them down before they could traverse guns toward the approaching aircraft. Men trained for years, men with families, men who'd survived China campaigns, dead in 3 seconds because the Americans had done something unexpected, something impossible. Henderson's bombardier released at 100 yards. 3 bombs, delayed fuses set for water impact. The first bomb skipped off the water like a stone thrown by a giant, hit the hull 3 feet below the waterline, punched through steel plate weakened by corrosion and stress, detonated inside the engine room. The explosion blew the engine room crew apart. 17 men atomized. Steam lines ruptured. Scalding steam filled compartments. Men screaming, men dying. Power to the ship died. Lights out. Pumps stopped. The Kyokusei Maru was mortally wounded 30 seconds after Henderson's strafers arrived. Second bomb hit amidships. Detonated in troop compartment where 800 Japanese soldiers were packed in darkness, waiting to land, waiting to fight. The compartment became a tomb. Fire and shrapnel in enclosed space. Men had nowhere to run. The ship's thin hull plates meant the explosion went through multiple compartments. The casualty count from that single bomb exceeded 200. Third bomb missed, skipped past the stern, sank harmlessly. 1 miss out of 3. Better ratio than high-altitude bombing had ever achieved. Kyokusei Maru was dead in the water, fire spreading through superstructure. Listing to port, would sink in 40 minutes. Half the crew and most of the troops already dead or dying. The transport Teo Maru's captain saw Kyokusei Maru die, watched the whole thing through binoculars from his bridge, saw the strafers come in low, saw the guns fire, saw his sister ship torn apart. He pushed his engines to maximum, 15 knots, running for lay. Maybe he could beach the ship, unload the troops onto shore, save someone, save anyone. B-25 strafers were doing 240 knots. The mathematics was simple and brutal. The captain's courage was irrelevant. His experience was irrelevant. His desperate attempt to save his men was irrelevant. 4 strafers bracketed Teo Maru from both sides, port and starboard, simultaneously. 50 caliber streams converged on the deck from multiple directions. No escape, no cover, no way to defend against attacks from both sides at once. The ship's executive officer took rounds through the chest and throat. He'd been married 3 months before shipping out. His wife was pregnant. He'd never see the baby. The captain lasted 10 seconds longer before a burst cut him down at the knees, then finished him with rounds through the torso. Both men died on the bridge trying to save a ship that was already doomed. Gunners on deck tried to fight back. Brave men, disciplined men, veterans who'd faced Chinese forces and British forces and knew how to fight. But they were firing small-caliber weapons at aircraft moving 200 miles per hour. Their training hadn't covered this. Their doctrine hadn't imagined this. Their rounds passed harmlessly behind the strafers, while 50 caliber rounds tore them apart. 8 bombs dropped total from 4 aircraft. 5 direct hits, The hull cracked amidships. The ship broke in half like a toy snapped by an angry child. Metal shrieking, bulkheads collapsing. The two halves began sinking immediately. Japanese soldiers were below decks when the ship split. Most never made it topside. Those who did jumped into the Bismarck Sea wearing full combat gear. Packs, rifles, ammunition, helmets. 70 pounds of equipment designed for land warfare. The weight dragged them under. Some struggled. Some went down fast. All drowned. Bodies floating. Bodies sinking. 1,200 men who'd boarded in Rabaul expecting to reinforce lie. Gone. Teomaru sank in 6 minutes. The destroyer Shikinami tried to screen the transports. Her captain was doing what destroyers were designed to do. Protect the convoy, draw fire, create a barrier between the transports and the attackers. Heroic, futile. Royal Australian Air Force bow fighters strafed Shikinami's deck first. Twin-engine fighters coming in fast and low, guns hammering. Japanese anti-aircraft crews took casualties. Some guns went silent, gaps in the defensive fire, men dead at their posts. Then the B-25 strafers arrived. 3 strafers attacked from different angles simultaneously. Port starboard and bow. The destroyer couldn't turn into all 3 attacks at once. Physics wouldn't allow it. The captain chose to turn into the bow attack. Left his flanks exposed. No good options, just bad options and worse options. Bombs hit port side, starboard side, amidships. The destroyer didn't sink immediately. Destroyers were built tougher than transports. More compartmentalization, better damage control, but it was finished. Dead in the water, fire spreading, forward magazine at risk of detonating. Crew knew what that meant. Abandon ship or die in the explosion. Shikinami's crew abandoned ship 2 hours later. Those who could, those still alive, those not trapped below decks. The destroyer sank at dusk, taking classified codebooks in the bodies of 73 crew members down with her. By 0900 hours, 3 hours after first attack, the situation was clear. 5 transports sinking or burning, 2 destroyers crippled. Remaining ships scattered across 40 square miles of ocean in complete disarray. Approximately 4,000 Japanese soldiers dead or in the water or dying. Allied losses: 2 P-38s shot down by Zeros that arrived too late, 4 aircrew killed. The convoy was broken, but not finished. Still 3 transports afloat. Still 2 destroyers capable of fighting. Still a chance to reach Alais if they could reorganize. If they could run. If the Americans didn't come back. The Americans came back. 1,400 hours. The strafers returned. Fresh bombs. Full ammunition loads. Angry and determined in knowing they had the enemy trapped. The Japanese had no fighter cover now. The Zeros had landed at Leh to refuel, were on the ground when second wave arrived. Perfect timing. Perfect execution. Transport Ayo Maru took 12 direct bomb hits in the afternoon attack. Concentrated fire from 3 strafers. The ship's forward magazine detonated. The explosion was massive, visible from Port Moresby, 130 miles away. A column of fire and smoke rising thousands of feet. When smoke cleared minutes later, there was nothing left. No wreckage, no debris field, no survivors. 1,800 Japanese soldiers gone in 3 seconds. Atomized. The magazine explosion had been so violent, it vaporized the ship. Captain Henderson's strafer came in low over transport Igawa Maru. His co-pilot counted 14 separate fires on the deck. Black smoke, orange flames. Japanese soldiers jumping overboard. Swimming away from the burning ship. Anti-aircraft guns silent. Crews dead or fled. The ship was dying already. Henderson's attack was mercy. His bombardier released at point-blank range. 50 yards, 2 bombs, both hit. The transport settled by the stern and capsized. Rolled over, the hull visible, propellers still turning. 900 men drowned in compartments that became death traps when the ship inverted. The modified A-20 Havocs hunted the crippled destroyers. Smaller aircraft, more maneuverable. Perfect for finishing damaged ships that couldn't fight back effectively. Destroyer Asashio was attempting to rescue survivors from the water. Humanitarian mission. Japanese sailors pulling exhausted soldiers from the sea, trying to save someone, trying to do something good in the middle of horror. Three A-20s attacked from different directions. Asacio's crew was focused on rescue operations, lifelines over the side, men in the water. They never saw the strafers until guns opened fire. 50 caliber rounds walking across the deck, killing rescuers and rescued. Bombs hit forward, deck, and bridge. The destroyer burned through the night and sank at dawn, March 4th. Few survivors. Most went down with the ship. By evening of March 3rd, the arithmetic of destruction was complete. 8 transports sunk. 4 destroyers sunk. Of nearly 7,000 Japanese troops, fewer than 1,200 reached Lae in damaged vessels that limped into port. 2,700 were rescued and returned to Rabaul in the following days. The rest died in the Bismarck Sea, drowned, killed by bombs, killed by strafing, bodies floating in oil slicks, bodies washed up on New Guinea beaches for weeks afterward. Allied losses: 4 aircraft total, 1 B-17, 3 P-38s, 13 aircrew killed. Acceptable casualties for the complete destruction of an enemy convoy. General Douglas MacArthur called it one of the most complete and annihilating combats of all time. The Japanese never again attempted to reinforce New Guinea by convoy. The strategic situation in the Southwest Pacific had fundamentally changed. The war had turned, and it turned because of Pappy Mitchell's impossible gunship. Back in Ohio, Wright Field engineers were drafting their formal report explaining why the B-25 modifications couldn't possibly work. General Carson sent message to General Anderson in Washington March 5th. Subject line: Commerce Destroyer modifications, approved for production. Body of message contained 1 paragraph. 12 B-25 strafers destroyed entire Japanese convoy. 8 transports sunk. 4 destroyers sunk. 7,000 enemy troops killed. Request immediate factory integration of Ford gun package into all B-25 production aircraft. General Anderson called North American Aviation President Dutch Kindleberger that afternoon. Kindleberger said his engineers needed to see the modifications. Anderson said he was sending the man who designed them. Robert Mitchell didn't want to leave Australia. His family was 2,000 miles north in Manila, starving, dying. Every day in Santo Tomas was a day closer to death. Going to California meant going in the wrong direction, away from Maggie, away from the children, away from everything that mattered. General Carson made it an order. 5th Air Force needs factory-built strafers. Hundreds of them. You're the only man who can show North American aviation how to do it right. 6 weeks. Then you're back in the Pacific. Promise back in Pacific within 6 weeks. Close enough to the Philippines to matter. Close enough to fight toward Manila. Mitchell accepted because orders were orders, and because factory production meant more strafers, meant winning faster, meant getting to his family sooner. Every decision traced back to that single purpose. Mitchell landed Long Beach, California, March 27, 1943. North American Aviation Plant covered 140 acres. 20,000 workers on 3 shifts. Assembly line produced 1 B-25 every 4 hours. Industrial capacity beyond anything in the Pacific. The difference between war production at home and war fighting abroad was the difference between abundance and scarcity. Factory engineers studied Mitchell's hand-drawn blueprints with expressions ranging from bewilderment to concern. These weren't proper engineering drawings, no standardized symbols, no complete specifications, just sketches and notes and measurements that assumed the reader understood aircraft as well as the writer did. Engineer asked politely, "Captain, where are your stress calculations?" Mitchell answered. "Don't have any. Wind tunnel testing. Tested it by flying. The center of gravity problem." Mitchell showed where he'd moved radio equipment aft to compensate, pointed to notes about tail trim adjustments, explained the iterative process of testing and adjusting until it worked. One senior engineer pointed at the cheek gun mounts with obvious concern. "Captain, the muzzle blast from 50 caliber guns will peel the aluminum skin right off the fuselage at these mounting points. The vibration alone will cause metal fatigue. This cannot work as designed." Mitchell pulled out photographs of his prototype after 50 missions, showed the fuselage skin, showed it intact, then explained, "It does peel the skin initially, so I welded blast tubes that extend beyond the propeller arc and direct the muzzle blast away from the structure." Problem solved. The engineers spent 2 weeks reverse engineering Mitchell's field modifications into production drawings. They strengthened nose structure with additional ribs, redesigned gun mounts for easier installation on assembly line, added heavier gauge aluminum patches where stress analysis showed weakness, calculated exact center of gravity shift, and adjusted tail trim accordingly so every aircraft came off the line properly balanced. May 10, 1943. First factory-built B-25G Strafer rolled off assembly line, 450 caliber guns in solid nose as Mitchell had designed, plus a 75mm M4 cannon in forward fuselage. Same ammunition as M3 Lee tank. One shell could hold a destroyer below the waterline. New capability, new lethality. Mitchell Test flew the prototype. The 75mm cannon recoiled 4 feet when fired. The entire aircraft shuddered like it had been hit. The navigator had to manually reload the cannon between shots, climb into the nose compartment, extract spent shell casing, load new round, close breech, rate of fire 1 round every 30 seconds. Slow but devastating. Mitchell told the engineers honestly, it'll work for ships, maybe not for anything faster. Ships don't maneuver like fighters. North American Aviation built 400 B-25G Strafers. Then they improved the design based on field feedback. The B-25H added 4 more 50 caliber guns in the cheek packs, 8 guns in nose, 4 in cheeks, 2 in top turret rotated forward, 14 forward firing guns total. Same as Mitchell's original field modification. The engineers had come full circle back to his original design. Eventually, B-25J removed the 75mm cannon entirely. Too heavy, too slow firing. Added 4 more 50 caliber guns instead. 18 forward firing guns, 50 caliber ammunition only, simpler logistics, more reliable. Most heavily armed production bomber in history. The culmination of Mitchell's concept refined by engineers and proven by combat. North American Aviation built 4,900 B-25Js. Factory production meant standardization, meant reliability, meant every Strafer performed the same way. No more field modifications, no more hand welding, just production aircraft are rolling off the line ready to kill. Mitchell returned to Australia in May 1943. 6 weeks exactly as promised. Carson kept his word. Mitchell's family was still in Manila, still in Santo Tomas, still starving. Intelligence reports showed conditions worsening, death rate increasing, children dying from diseases that shouldn't kill anyone. The race between victory and death was accelerating, and Mitchell couldn't tell who was winning. The Strafers kept hunting across the Pacific through 1943 and 1944. Every modified B-25 in theater. Every crew trained on the tactics. The doctrine spreading. April 1943 destroyed 16 Japanese barges carrying troops near Fonshafen. May 1943 sank 12 cargo ships at WWII Harbor. June 1943 hit oil facilities at Balikpapan, Borneo. Storage tanks burned for 3 days, smoke visible for 50 miles. Japanese stopped moving supplies by ship in daylight. Didn't help. Strafers learned to attack at night using primitive radar. Learned to skip bomb from 50 feet in complete darkness. Learned to coordinate with PT boats that illuminated targets with searchlights at the last second before Strafers attacked. Japanese called the modified B-25s Black Death. They weren't wrong. The name spread through prisoner interrogations. Japanese sailors feared them more than submarines, more than anything else the Americans had. November 2nd, 1943. Major Daniel Crawford led 4 squadrons of Strafers into Rabaul Harbor, 59 B-25s among 137 aircraft total. The harbor held 38 Japanese vessels, cruisers, destroyers, tankers, cargo ships, minesweepers. Japan's major forward supply base in the Southwest Pacific. Everything they needed to sustain operations in New Guinea. The Strafers came in at masthead height through phosphorus smoke that blinded the anti-aircraft gunners. White smoke everywhere. Visibility 0. Attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. Japanese couldn't track them all. Couldn't coordinate defense. Chaos. 15 minutes of sustained attack. 30 ships hit. 5 sunk outright. 12 damaged beyond repair. The rest limping. Some beached to prevent sinking. Some scuttled by their own crews. Rabaul Harbor was finished as forward supply base. Japan's ability to support operations south of New Britain was crippled. Mitchell flew that mission. He was 44 years old, didn't have to fly combat. He was Special Projects Officer Headquarters Staff. His job was modification design, not fighting. But his family was still in Manila. Every mission took him closer. Every sortie was another step north toward the Philippines, toward Maggie, toward the children, toward the only thing that mattered. Intelligence reports from Santo Tomas reached Mitchell's desk weekly now, each worse than the last, each a countdown to tragedy. November 1943 report, food rations cut to one meal every other day. Rice, thin vegetable soup, nothing else. Adult prisoners losing 40 pounds on average. Children showing severe malnutrition, kwashiorkor, beriberi, diseases from protein deficiency and vitamin deficiency, medical supplies exhausted. Camp hospital couldn't treat anything. Just watch people die and document cause of death. December 1943, 23 prisoner deaths. January 1944, 37 deaths. February 1944, 41 deaths. The curve accelerating, racing toward catastrophe. Japanese camp commander repeated his threat through Red Cross channels. All prisoners will be executed if American forces approach Manila. Prepare accordingly. Mitchell received these reports in his quarters late at night. Read them by lamplight. Knew his family was among those statistics. Knew Sarah and Catherine and James were in those numbers somewhere. Knew Maggie was starving. Knew Michael was trying to be strong for his younger siblings. Knew and couldn't do anything except fight faster, win faster, get there before it was too late. Mitchell's nightmares intensified through 1944. Same dream repeatedly. He arrives at Santo Tomas after liberation. Gates open, American troops everywhere. But he's too late. He finds Maggie in the hospital barrack. She's unrecognizable, emaciated, dying. Sarah beside her also dying. Catherine and James already gone. Michael missing. Maggie looks at him, doesn't know who he is, doesn't recognize the man she married. Says weakly, "Are you here to help? My husband is coming." He promised he'd come. Mitchell tries to explain he is her husband. She doesn't believe him. Her Bob wouldn't have let this happen. Her Bob would have saved them. This stranger is lying. He wakes up screaming every time. Sheets soaked with sweat, heart racing, takes an hour to calm down, to remember it was just a dream, to remember they're still alive, still waiting, still holding on because he promised he'd come. First 8 months of 1944, 5th Air Force strafers destroyed 947 Japanese aircraft on ground, sank 273 ships, killed, estimated 38,000 Japanese soldiers. The modified B-25s had become the decisive weapon in Southwest Pacific campaign. Mitchell's concept proven beyond any doubt. His impossible gunship was winning the war. October 20th, 1944. American forces landed at Leyte in Philippines. Liberation of Manila was 3 months away. Mitchell's family had been in captivity nearly 3 years. 1,000 days of starvation. 1,000 nights of fear. He was flying multiple missions every day now. Maintenance officers told him to rest. Medical officers said he was exhausted. Carson suggested he take leave. Mitchell refused everything. Told his crew chief simply, "I won't stop until my family is free." November 27th, 1944. 0330 hours. Japanese bombers hit Tacloban airfield. 56 aircraft. Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers with 0 fighter escorts. They came in low from the north. Radar operators saw them, but too late to scramble fighters. Too late to do anything except take cover. Mitchell was in operations tent reviewing mission plans for morning strike when first bomb hit. The tent was 200 yards from main runway. Close enough to see aircraft. Too close to survive a direct hit. Blast wave knocked him off his feet, threw him against tent pole, canvas walls shredding from shrapnel, tent collapsing, men screaming, explosions everywhere. A fragment hit Mitchell's left leg. Sharp pain, hot and cold simultaneously. Another fragment hit his shoulder. He tried to stand. Couldn't. Leg wouldn't support weight. Medical officer found him trying to crawl toward the flight line. Blood soaking through flight suit. Face pale from shock. Mitchell said through gritted teeth, "I need to check on my aircraft," doctor said. "You need surgery. Now." Mitchell made it 30 feet before he collapsed. Blood loss. Shock. pain, overwhelming determination. The last thing he remembered before passing out was thinking, not now. Not when I'm this close. Not before I get them home. They evacuated him to hospital at Leyte. Emergency surgery. The leg wound was serious. Shrapnel had severed an artery. Surgeon worked 3 hours to repair the damage. Save the leg, save the man. Surgeon told him afterward, "You won't fly again for 6 months minimum. Probably longer. These injuries qualify you for medical retirement. You've served enough, done enough, you can go home." 45 years old, 26 years service between Navy and Army Air Force. He'd earned the right to go home, earned it in blood and innovation and 3 years of fighting toward one goal. Mitchell told the surgeon, quietly, firmly, "I'm not going anywhere until my family is free." The doctor didn't argue. Some men you couldn't argue with, some determinations were absolute. Outside the hospital ward, the war continued. The strafers kept flying. Mitchell's modifications, Mitchell's tactics, Mitchell's impossible gunship fighting toward Manila. And in Santo Tomas, 200 miles north, Maggie Mitchell lay in her bunk telling Sarah the same thing she'd told her for 3 years. "Your father's coming. Just hold on a little longer. He's coming." Neither of them knew if it was true anymore. But belief was all they had left. December 1944 through January 1945, Mitchell recovered at Leyte Hospital. Leg in cast, shoulder immobilized, physical therapy daily, pain constant. Doctors saying 6 months before full recovery, 6 months before he could walk properly, a year before he could fly. But intelligence reports from Santo Tomas showed he didn't have 6 months. Nobody imprisoned there had 6 months. Food rations cut again. 1 bowl of rice every other day now, sometimes less. Prisoners dying at increasing rate. December 1944, 23 deaths. January 1945, 37 deaths. February projected over 50. The curve was exponential. Mathematical certainty pointed toward mass death. Mitchell's children had been imprisoned for 3 years. Sarah was now 18 years old, had spent ages 15 through 18 in starvation conditions. The years when a girl becomes a woman stolen. Michael was 15, had entered camp at 12, entire adolescence erased. Catherine was 11, James was 8. Childhood stolen by barbed wire and hunger and Japanese guards who didn't care if children lived or died. Mitchell told doctors he was returning to duty. They said, "Impossible." He said, "Watch me." Physical therapy became obsessive. 4 hours daily, then 6, then 8. Working the leg until it screamed, until he could walk, then until he could run, until the weakness became strength through pure determination. February 3rd, 1945, American forces entered Manila, 1st Cavalry Division rolling through northern districts. The Japanese had declared the city a fortress. They would defend every street, house-to-house combat, building to building, room to room. The fighting was brutal beyond anything American forces had seen in the Pacific. Japanese forces had rigged buildings with explosives, used civilians as human shields, fought to the death in every structure. No surrender, no retreat, just death and destruction in a city burning. American commanders estimated 2 weeks to secure Manila. It would take a month. 100,000 Filipino civilians would die in the crossfire. The city would burn, ancient Spanish churches destroyed, centuries of history erased. The cost of liberation measured in ruins and bodies. But Santo Tomas internment camp was in the northern part of the city. American forces reached it on the first day. 1st Cavalry Division tanks broke through the gates at 2100 hours. 3,700 Allied prisoners freed in single moment. 3 years of captivity ending. The liberation was chaos. Prisoners streaming out of barracks, some too weak to walk, others running despite weakness, crying, disbelieving, asking if it was real, if the Americans were really there, if the nightmare was truly over. Medical teams established triage in main courtyard. Combat medics who'd seen everything were shocked by the conditions. Living skeletons. Children with distended bellies from malnutrition. Kwashiorkor. Beriberi. Adults weighing 80 to 90 pounds. Men who should have weighed 170 pounds at 85 pounds. Women who should have weighed 130 at 70. Widespread disease. Dysentery. Malaria. Typhoid. tuberculosis, things that shouldn't exist in civilized society. Maggie Mitchell, 89 pounds, down from 135 pounds in January 1942, severe malnutrition, anemia, chronic dysentery that had lasted 6 months, beriberi affecting her legs. She couldn't walk without assistance, muscles atrophied from starvation, body consuming itself to stay alive. Sarah, 63 pounds, growth permanently stunted, amenorrhea from starvation. Her body had stopped all non-essential functions, dental problems from lack of nutrition, calcium deficiency, vitamin deficiency, damage that would affect her entire life. Catherine, 51 pounds, malaria, intestinal parasites. Developmental delays from prolonged malnutrition. At 11 years old, she looked 7. Mental development slowed by lack of proper nutrition during critical growth years. James, 38 pounds. Multiple diseases, chronic diarrhea, parasites. Malnutrition so severe doctors weren't sure he would survive, even with treatment. The youngest had suffered most. 5 years old, weighs 38 pounds, was a death sentence waiting to happen. Michael, 78 pounds, malaria, parasites. But he protected his younger siblings, given them portions of his food, stood between them and other prisoners who might steal. It had cost him in body weight, cost him in health. But his siblings were alive because of it. All alive, barely, hanging on by threads of determination and luck, and the simple refusal to die before their father came. February 4th, 1945. Mitchell flew to Manila against medical orders, against direct commands from his superior officers, against every regulation in the manual, his legs still bandaged. Using a cane, doctor had cleared him for light duty only, desk work, no combat flying, certainly no flying at all. The paperwork explicitly said grounded until further notice. Mitchell went anyway. Commandeered a C-47 transport at Leyte, told the pilot flatly, "Get me to Manila or I'm flying it myself." The pilot looked at Mitchell's face, looked at his rank, looked at his eyes, saw something there that made argument impossible. They flew. They landed at Nichols Field mid-morning. The city was still under fire. Artillery in the distance. Machine gun fire closer, smoke rising from multiple districts, bullets snapping overhead occasionally. Mitchell didn't care, didn't notice. Took a jeep driven by a private who asked no questions. Drove to Santo Tomas through streets that might contain Japanese holdouts, through a city dying violently. Mitchell arrived at Santo Tomas 1100 hours. The camp was organized chaos. Medical teams treating thousands. Freed prisoners everywhere. Moving slowly, sitting, crying, laughing, expressions of shock and relief and disbelief. Army administrators trying to process everyone, taking names, recording information, trying to create order from chaos. Mitchell went to the makeshift hospital the Army had established. Building 6, asked for Margaret Mitchell and children. A nurse checked the list. Long list, alphabetical, found the name. Building 6, second floor. But sir, visiting hours don't start until 1400 hours. Mitchell was already walking, limping, cane tapping on concrete, legs screaming pain with each step agony. Didn't matter. Nothing mattered except getting upstairs. He climbed the stairs, one at a time, using the railing, pulling himself up because the leg wouldn't support full weight yet. Each step an individual battle, each landing a victory. Second floor, rows of cots, emaciated figures lying on them, some unconscious, some staring, some sleeping, the sleep of people who hadn't felt safe enough to sleep in 3 years. He walked down the aisle looking for faces he'd recognize, faces he'd memorized from photographs, faces he saw every time he closed his eyes. He didn't recognize anyone. 3 years had turned everyone into strangers. Starvation had stolen faces and replaced them with skulls covered in skin. A woman looked at him from a cot. She was skeletal. Gray hair, sunken eyes, skin stretched over bones. He kept walking. Didn't know her. Couldn't be her. The woman spoke. Voice weak but clear. "Excuse me, are you here to help?" Mitchell stopped. That voice, he'd heard that voice in his dreams for 3 years. In his nightmares. In his memories. That voice reading to children. That voice saying his name. He turned back, looked at the woman again. Really looked. She couldn't be Maggie. Maggie was 38 years old. This woman looked 60. Gray hair, aged face, body destroyed. But the voice, she said politely, trying not to be a burden. I'm sorry to bother you, but my children need medicine. Is there any available? They said doctors would come, but I haven't seen any yet. Mitchell stared. This couldn't be Maggie. But the voice was right. The cadence, the way she said children, the slight accent on certain words from growing up in Nebraska. He spoke. Voice rough. Maggie, she squinted at him. Eyes damaged from vitamin deficiency. Do I know you? It's me. It's Bob. No recognition in her eyes. None. She said politely, confused, I'm sorry. My husband's name is Robert, but he's not here. He's in the military somewhere. Fighting. I'm waiting for him. He promised he'd come back. Mitchell felt his heart break. Physical pain in his chest. Worse than shrapnel. Worse than anything. She didn't know him. 3 years had stolen recognition, stolen memory, stolen everything. He'd lost 40 pounds since she'd last seen him. His hair had gone completely gray. He was wearing army uniform instead of the civilian clothes she remembered. 3 years had aged him 15 years. He looked 58 instead of 43. The war had taken his face and replaced it with a stranger's face. He knelt beside her cot, took her hand, skeletal hand, bones and skin and nothing else. Said her name again. Maggie, it's me, it's Bob. I came back. I told you I'd come back. Maggie studied his face, looked at his eyes, saw something there, familiar, something from before, from the life that felt like a dream now, she whispered. Bob, yes, I'm here. No, no, you can't be. Bob wouldn't. She stopped, looked at him closer, really looked, touched his face with skeletal fingers. Your eyes, you have his eyes, the same green, the same way of looking. It's me, Maggie. I promise I came back for you. For all of you, I'm here now. She started crying. Couldn't stop. Tears running down wasted cheeks. 3 years of held tears. 3 years of being strong for the children. 3 years of telling them their father was coming. And he had come. He'd actually come. The children. Where are the children? Mitchell looked around, saw 4 other cots nearby. 4 thin figures. 4 people who might be his children or might be strangers. Starvation made everyone look the same. Sarah on the nearest cot. She heard voices, turned her head slowly. Energy conservation automatic after 3 years. Looked at Mitchell with no recognition. Just another soldier. Another American who wasn't her father. He said, Sarah, it's Dad. Sarah stared, blinked, stared harder. Dad, her voice breaking on the word. Dad, is that really you? He went to her, held her carefully. She weighed nothing, like holding a bundle of sticks wrapped in cloth. She started crying into his shoulder. Couldn't stop. 18 years old and crying like she was 5 again. Michael appeared from somewhere. He'd been stronger, able to move around, checking on his sisters, protecting them even now. He looked at Mitchell, studied him. Recognition came faster. He'd always been smart, always thinking. Michael said quietly, I knew you'd come. I told them you'd come. They didn't always believe me, but I knew. Catherine and James were too weak to really understand, too sick, too damaged. But they knew something important was happening. Their mother was crying. Their older siblings were crying. This strange man was crying. Something had changed. The nightmare might be ending. The official Army report stated simply, Colonel Robert Mitchell was reunited with his family on February 4, 1945, at Santo Tomas Internment Camp, Manila. The reunion lasted 4 hours. 4 hours, after 3 years, after 1,095 days, after 26,280 hours. 4 hours together, and then Mitchell had to return to Leyte. His medical leave wasn't over. The war wasn't over. Manila was still burning. Japanese were still fighting.